Hi guys, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network. Just wanting to come to you for another Sunday session. This particular week, we're going to be concentrating on one called Minimizing Impacts and Maximising Opportunities During Market Uncertainty. In these very difficult times in and around the coronavirus that we've got going on, we've got plenty that's happening in our market that's going to make the times ahead a little bit uncertain. So what I wanted to do is spend a little bit of time going through with you some of the implications, impacts, and opportunities for you to be looking at in how you're actually going to prepare for these difficult times. So firstly, let's get into, I guess, a little bit of history. So from a history perspective, I've been in and around the property market for about 32 years. And in that time, I've actually seen 3 different market crashes. So first one was the recession that we had to have back in 1990. Now, at that point in time, I was only about 21 years of age, and I, at the time, was in 2 different properties at the time, bought my first house at the age of 18, and interest rates were in and around the 17% mark. So certainly saw the implications of that. Also in, I guess, the Y2K millennium bug, I guess lots of impacts in and around that, and the GFC side of things, some implications in and around those things. So seeing 3 market cycles go up and down gives you some fairly good insights as to what to expect from a media hype perspective, from a market movement perspective, and I guess how the markets actually respond and react. So the key to that is, if you haven't learned from history, then we're doomed to repeat it. And so what I'm trying to get you guys to have some insights into today is to see where some of these, I guess, opportunities are to learn from history, and to how we can make sure that we're not going to repeat that ourselves. So here's something that I saw at a coffee shop the other day. Somebody shared this on Facebook. It's probably some of the best advice that I've actually seen around. Things that are more fun to spread than panic. Nutella, jam, and kindness. And I'm saying to you out there that we should be definitely spreading kindness. We should be not panicking. We should be concentrating on facts and not media hype. The media makes lots of money and gets lots of attention by hyping things up. The thing for you to do is become an educated person and not just listen to the media hype and not panic. Start acting on the facts. There are a number of very reputable organizations that are putting factual information out there. There's the World Health Organization, there's the Australian government's health department as well, telling you what is actually happening in and around the pandemic. Now, don't get me wrong. This is something to actually be concerned with, but it's not something to panic about, okay? The world is not ending. We are going to have some unfortunate people that are ill, and even more unfortunate people who are going to pass. But we can and will prepare and deal with this as and where appropriate. Some things for you to be cognizant of, I guess, in some of the media hype and media panic is to have a look at some of the symptoms that have been put out by the World Health Organization and the CDC, which is the American version of that, as to what some common issues and illnesses are that sit in and around the coronavirus, letting you know that it is something that is very similar to all the symptoms of your normal common flu and a common cold. So don't panic when you actually see that. This is important for people to understand that it's impacting only a small part of our society, and as a normal healthy human, the majority of us are going to be able to get this, and we're going to be able to recover from this. So not to panic. What you're seeing in the market right now, and what you're seeing the government do right now, sits all in and around this particular graph that you see here. You see, with either the flu or COVID or any other virus in and around that, the spread and how quickly the spread goes will impact whether or not our healthcare system can actually deal with it at capacity. when you hear them talking about flattening the curve, if they don't put preventative measures in place, what happens is that the amount of incidences that occur far outweigh the ability for our healthcare system to actually deal with it. So if they can flatten the curve, which is when the protective measures are in place, that then helps massively in the ability for the healthcare system to actually deal with the people who are genuinely needing the assistance. So our elderly, people with low immune systems, etc. So let's have a look at what that actually looks like. Here is a set of simulations that was done for a story in the Washington Post. Now, this is one of the best ways that I've actually seen this described for anyone out there. So what they're going to do is effectively run a simulation. I'm going to run a series of simulations to say, well, this is what would actually happen if I actually run the simulation. This is what would happen with regards to infestation if everybody just did their thing. And you see that if we kept on doing our business as per normal, the rate of infections spreads massively very, very quickly until we then build some immune systems. Then we start to self-heal and become immune, and eventually it flattens off. But it happens very, very quickly and spreads like wildfire. If, however, they do a separate kind of simulation where we try to contain the people that we think are infectious, inevitably one or two of them will actually get out. And then once they get into the masses, then again, it spreads and takes off like wildfire. So just containing a few people and try to contain them in very small spaces just doesn't work. It takes off very, very quickly. What the government is trying to do is this last simulation. So what this last simulation is saying is try to keep social distancing to yourself. Keep still, don't go anywhere unless it's absolutely necessary. If you do this, you see that the rate of infection drops massively. And this is really what we're trying to do. And if we don't panic, and if we actually do what the government is asking us to do, we will eventually all get infected, that is for sure. But it's going to be much, much slower, and our healthcare system can actually deal with it. And when they can deal with it, then if you happen to be in a serious condition, then they're able to give you the treatment that you deserve. So that said, that is the extent of my medical expertise. Now what we're going to be doing now is having a look at the impacts from a society point of view, where I want you to not be like this guy and have your head in the sand. What is inevitably about to happen as a result of this happening, not just to us here, but this is actually happening in and around the entire world. So the inevitable impacts on our economy. This is as I said, inevitable. There's going to be less people out and about spending money. This is the reality. So if there's less people out and about spending money, that means there's less people in coffee shops, there's less people in pubs and clubs, there's less people out in the shops. So if there's less people actually out spending money, then small businesses that employ these people will also struggle because they're going to have limited incomes. Now, if they're going to struggle with limited incomes, then almost invariably, they're going to struggle to be able to afford to keep people employed, meaning that there are going to be some people that will unfortunately lose their jobs in this short little while. What the government is trying to do right now is provide incentives to keep people spending and keep people doing things so that businesses can actually stay afloat, so that our economy doesn't actually fall down, okay? But financial distress is inevitably going to come to some, okay? Which means that they will inevitably start to sell assets, including property. What is important is to understand that if you're unknowledgeable, some people will panic. And if they're panicking, then that means that there's going to be a lot of assets being sold in a very short amount of time. Panic selling will kick in, which means that the economy, not only will the economy start to drop, but our property markets will start to drop as well. My guidance to you is to not panic, and you'll see why to not panic with some of the information that I'm going to be spreading, sharing with you, I guess, in a couple of seconds. Sorry, I'm saying spreading because I guess everybody is spreading something in this pandemic. So is a recession coming? Okay, so firstly, let's have a look. What is the definition of a recession? So it's 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product. Now, in my humble opinion, it's inevitable that a recession is going to occur. So let's have a look at why. So interest rates are already at record lows, which means that there's not much ammunition for the government to kickstart the economy. So one of the things that governments do to kickstart the economy is drop the interest rates, which encourages people to borrow money, which encourages people to spend money. Pretty much the only arsenal that they've got left in the tank is negative interest rates. What that does is it actually costs you money to keep your money in the bank. So if you're not going to keep your money in the bank because it's eroding your nest egg, then you're going to take it out of the bank and either stick it under a mattress, which is not going to do anything for you, or go out into the economy and spend it, which is what they're I guess trying to incentivize you to do. Okay, they're trying to incentivize you to go out and spend and stimulate the economy. That only goes so far. We are very close to zero interest rates right now, and because we are so low already, it's very difficult for them to actually use that as the ammunition that they need, which means that they need to go to the next part. So a stimulus package. So stimulus packages, we've had two rolled out. One was released today, but the whole idea is this is the government giving you money to spend. They're trying to keep the economy moving. They're trying to keep people employed, and they're trying to keep you actually spending money. The best thing that you can do right now is to keep trying as much as humanly possible within the confines of social distancing, keep spending money on the things that you normally would. Don't go out and panic buy, but instead go out and buy your normal food, your normal groceries, the normal things that you would do, and keep the economy turning over. If you're able to do that, we're going to panic a lot less. The economy is going to be impacted a lot less in that process. But the truth is that the world is actually being impacted, not just Australia, which means that supply chains both in and out of our country will also slow down. Now, they're not going to stop, but they will certainly slow down. The beauty about supply chains, which are very, very different to human movements, our supply chains generally come via sea. And because they come via sea, when it leaves one country, by the time it arrives here, it's generally been out to sea for at least a week, and quite often more, which means that by the time it arrives, it's already had its 14 days of social distancing for the goods that have actually been on that ship. And if it hasn't, they can stay in dock for not much time before they can actually go out and actually be utilized. So from a supply chain perspective, keeping those borders open is very different to keeping the borders of us humans traveling over on a plane and being on the other side of the planet in the matter of a couple of hours. So for those reasons, I don't think the supply chains will stop, but rather they will slow down. And the reason why they'll slow down is because in the country that they've just left, those people are also having people that are sick and also having people that are staying within homes because of the social distancing side of things. So it's not going to stop, but it is certainly going to slow down, which is why they're talking about the fact that this is going to be a 6-month timeline between, I guess, now and where we think it's actually going to start to return to some form of normality. So in my humble opinion, and note that I am not an economist, and I'm not suggesting that you take my opinion in isolation, but in my humble opinion, I think a recession is highly likely, but how bad it will get is still to be determined. And how bad it gets depends on you, depends on whether or not you can actually be responsible in, I guess, maintaining as much normality as humanly possible within the realms of how do I keep my social distancing and maintain a normal and healthy lifestyle. What I can tell you though, with a recession coming, don't panic. If we have a look at a history of recessions, we've had a number of them over many, many years, from World War II to the wall crash, Vietnam War, oil crisis, I guess the 87 crash, the tech crash. So that, I guess the 87/90 crash I was in, the tech crash I was in, the GFC, which is not showing on that chart I was in. And what you'll notice is the market does drop, but it also does recover. And when it recovers, it invariably recovers better than it was before, which is why it's important to not panic. If we can afford to prepare ourselves and if we can afford to ride this out, we will get back to a level of normality. The question is how quickly we get there, and I guess the short-term implications of how we actually deal with this. So hopefully some of the things that I'm going to show with you today are going to give you some insights into how and what to do. Now, let's have a look at where we're at in the market right now. So if we have a look at the Dow Jones, okay? So if we have a look at the Dow Jones, if we have a look at the 6 months side of things, you'll see that in January when COVID started to come about, I'm not sure if my mouse is going to show on here, but when COVID started to come about, didn't impact us straight away, but I guess now it's actually starting to impact us massively. But if we look at the long-term graph of that, over many, many years, you'll see that it's still on a very much upwards trend. And you can see that we've had a number of market cycles that have hit us in the, well, us, I guess Dow Jones is an American index, but it's a little bit more easy to get the insights on the American things than I did in the short term that I had. So similarly with the NASDAQ, you can see the NASDAQ has dropped, but over a long period of time, the NASDAQ has dropped and recovered over a number of different market cycles. So not to panic. Here's one where I am saying to you though, with market dropping and market recovering, there's a thing called incidence where you know that the overriding fundamentals of the stock or the overriding fundamentals of the commodity is fundamentally sound. So here is one where a perfect one right here. So Corona beer. Now the fundamentals of a Corona beer are that people are going to keep on drinking it for many, many years. But right now, Corona beer is down. Now, if I look at that from a long term, that is very much on an upwards trend. So if you are looking at fundamentals, I would be very much investing in Corona beer right now. I'm clearly one who invests in a fairly regular process. With every down, there is an up. With every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So there are stocks that are going down, but there are equally stocks that are going up. For example, I'm on this Zoom teleconference right now. Have a look at where Zoom was back in January before the coronavirus hit. Now, this is very, very much on an upwards trend. Why? Because everybody is staying home and running meetings online. We've converted all of our monthly meetups into Zoom teleconferences. So there are opportunities, even in a downward market, for an upward trend. And it's about using common sense and actually having a look at what is actually happening in the market at the time and going, if I was somebody needing this product, would I still be needing this product? There's going to be lots of other opportunities that sit in and around that. Toilet paper, I'm sure that the stocks in toilet paper have gone up. Pasta, I'm sure the stocks in pasta have gone up. Rice, I'm sure the stocks in rice have gone up. Now, I've not gone and researched every single one of them, but I guarantee that when we look at the short-term spikes, they are going counter cycle at this moment in time. Now, if we all were to spend normally, and if we were all to spend, wisely and not panic buy, then we wouldn't see, I guess, the giant drops, and we wouldn't see the giant rises in some of these stocks. So I guess over to you guys to do that. Now, let's have a look at property market drivers. Now, if we look at property market drivers, one of the things that I'd like to say that irrespective of stock markets crashing, if we have a look at, I guess, how the housing market has performed. Now, this is a map from, not a map, a graph from CoreLogic, and you'll see that the blue mark, that was the share price. And the yellowish mark or the orangish mark is the housing price index. So you'll see that there has historically been a lag. So here is the peak, and you'll see here is the peak, here is the drop, and you can see the drop comes here. There's always been a lag between the share market price and also the property market prices. Now it does follow, but it doesn't follow with the same intensity. So inevitably, we're seeing the stock market drop right now, which means inevitably we are going to see our property prices drop. Know that that's coming, okay? Don't be panicking about that. Know that it's there, be prepared that it's there, and know that in the longer term, we can and will recover as we have every other time. Why will we recover? Well, let's have a look at our property fundamentals. Firstly, demand, population growth. I'm going to talk about population growth in a little bit more detail in a minute, but if we have a look at immigration, births and deaths, we've got a massively growing population here in Australia, and I'll talk to the details of that in a couple of moments. So our demand is very, very high. If we then look at supply, dwelling approvals and construction commencements, so we've got some relatively high dwelling approvals, but the construction commencements didn't occur because we actually had some market forces that went against us only a couple of years ago. So we had the booms in Sydney and the booms in Melbourne, and they dropped off. When they started to drop off, the construction side of things dropped at the same time. So we've got a disparity between the amount of demand we've got and the amount of supply that we've got. Right now, because of the fact that we're going into, I guess, this depressive timeline, the supply is going to drop off even more, which means that the demand is going to stay there, and there's going to be some creative tension that sits between the demand and the supply, meaning that it has to come back because our population is still growing, and if we're not creating the stock, then inevitably that differential is going to mean that the market is going to come back to us. If we have a look at housing affordability, well, interest rates are as low as humanly possible. So I guess from that perspective, there's a lot of people that could get into the market if we didn't have things like the bank's royal commissions and another number of other things stopping us. Getting money recently has been quite difficult. Now, the government is trying to release some of that difficulty right now, and there has been a lot of infrastructure projects and government incentives that have been leading up to this particular moment in time. Right now, the government is putting a lot of incentives in and around keeping jobs alive. They're putting a lot of stimulus packages in to try and make sure that jobs stay alive, that the economy keeps on moving. So if we have a look at those differentials, yes, we're going to have some drops, but I think that in the longer term, our property fundamentals are very strong, okay? Now, the one negative that sits in and around these, when we look at property fundamentals, is this one here, sentiment. Now, the market sentiment is driven by media hype and media hysteria. Media makes money by selling newspapers, by getting eyeballs watching TV shows. They are going to be hyping, and they have been hyping this particular event. Yes, it is newsworthy, absolutely, but the amount of coverage that it's getting and the, I guess, the drive that it's creating is creating hysteria, and it's creating the panic buying and the unreasonableness of people in the market. If you are in the media, stop it. You're fucktards, okay? I can't say that any fucking clearer. You guys are causing panic unnecessarily. Yes, there's going to be health issues. Yes, there's going to be deaths, but there doesn't need to be the amount of hysteria that you guys are creating. Let's look at the property markets and why I think our changing demographics are going to be working for us in the longer term. This is a story that I've been presenting for quite some time, so this is not new for some of you. We've got a very aging population, okay? We've got the baby boomers of the past who had the great Aussie dream of having the big backyard. These guys are aging very, very fast. They're getting to a point where that big backyard is getting to a point where it's actually starting to become a burden for them. They're looking to downsize. They want to stay in the areas where they have always lived, but they want to move into properties that have a lower amount of maintenance required for them. So they don't want two-story dwellings, and they don't want a huge backyard where they need to mow. They're looking to downsize. Equally, we have a massive growing population. In the next 25 years, we are predicted to grow 10 million people across Australia. So when I said population growth before, this is where it's coming from. So we've got a young, upwardly mobile society that's coming, and most of these guys are wanting a low maintenance lifestyle. They're wanting the cafe latte lifestyle where when they leave their property and they go out, they have some fun. When they come home, it's exactly the same way that it was. Now, how do we deal with that where we've got young people that are single, where we've got young people that have got young kids, where we've got kids with growing, growing families? all the way through to the aged, well, I guess we have to provide a variety of housing styles in order to do that. One of the things that's been in driving that, though, housing diversity needs to have all of those different styles, but housing affordability has been the thing that has actually been impacting us. Because of the fact that property pricing has been going up for all this time, it means that housing affordability is becoming more and more challenging, which means that when we combine all of these elements together, we are going to have a massive demand for stock, but it's going to be a different kind of stock than it has been in the past. It's not going to be the big McMansion that we've always had these dreams of, but instead much, much smaller homes with much, much smaller footprints. Now let's have a look at where these populations are actually going to go. So if we have a look at the population growth, there's between 350,000 and 400,000 people per annum that are going to need some form of household to live in, okay? And 80% of them are going to live in just 4 urban areas. So Melbourne, Sydney, Southeast Queensland, and Perth. They're going to take the bulk of the population over the next 25 years, okay? So if you're looking to do anything in and around property, if you're looking to do something, the opportunities are sitting in those particular markets where the demand is going to outstrip supply in the short to medium term by a long way, okay? Now, there's a thing called the missing middle. So the missing middle looks at what does that housing stock actually start to look like? Now, if I look at developers of the past, the big developers used to do giant urban sprawls and go out into suburbia and I guess miles and miles of brand new homes, house and land packages, house and land packages. The problem with that is that it then got to a point where getting to work became a pain in the bum. And if you, many instances, you're driving over an hour in order to get to work. So the developers went, well, we can fix that. What we'll do is we'll create these high-rise apartments and you can live somewhere close to work and it's going to be much, much easier to get there. The problem is because of those market forces that I was talking about before, with people wanting to downsize and stay in the areas that they're living, and young upwardly mobiles wanting to live in those same sorts of areas, there's actually a gap that sits in between these here. So this kind of stock, what they call infill development, is going to sit in the middle of our existing dwellings. So people with large blocks of land are going to be downsizing those, and we're going to kind of jam these different product types in the gaps that were the big backyard of the past, maybe amalgamate a site or two in order to create them. Now, we need a range of different housing stock in order to do that. The housing stock that we're going to need is going to suit all the different demographics that I spoke about. How do you have young upwardly mobiles that are single? How do you have young people with young families still wanting some form of backyard but not a large one? How do you have families that require a larger backyard but not too large a backyard? How do you deal with the older generation? Well, we need to have a range of different stocks. So anything from granny flats to small lot homes, duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, etc. Now, I've been pushing this message now for close to 3 years, and it's now starting to get a little bit of traction where people are actually starting to recognize and see these opportunities that are sit there. My guidance to you is to pick one of these strategies, not all of them, just one. Get very good at that one. And if you get very good at that one, you'll start to see opportunities start to present itself. Here's the thing. Right now, people are trying to downsize. Right now, they're going to be sitting in financial challenges, and there's going to be opportunities where people are going to be selling off their assets that are developable. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that you take advantage of people. Instead, what you want to try and do is find ways that you can actually help them so they don't get into financial distress. And at the same time, that's actually going to be able to help you. There are ways to actually offer people more money if they can give you time in order to do that, which means that even if you don't have money, you can actually work with them with no money down strategies that will actually help you through the process. So the thing is, are you ready? Okay. Are you ready to take on what is inevitably going to be a short-term dip in the market, but will then turn around and become a large opportunity at the tail end of that? So firstly, This gentleman, Warren Buffett, says, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. Right now, people are fearful. Okay, they are panicking. They are dropping their bundle and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Now is the time to get ready for the opportunities that present itself. If you don't have money right now, here is a small piece of advice that I saw on Facebook. Whoever owes you money right now, go to their homes. They will be home. They've been told to stay home. This is my one piece of humor for the entire session. Okay. In all seriousness, you want to be trying to cash up as much as you can right this very second and assess your current situation. Have a look at your current situation right now. Do not hope and pray. Stay up to date with all the knowledges from all knowledgeable sources, okay? Do not listen to media hype. I'm telling you, the media are just there to sell you newspapers. They're just there to sell you eyeballs that are sitting there glued to the TVs. Take a look at your assets and liabilities. Make a true assessment of where you're sitting at. Work out what liabilities that you've got that you can get rid of. What is not serving you well right now that you can get rid of, not in a panic, but in a calm, clear, sensible, unemotional way. So do you have liabilities that are a phone plan that is too large? Do you have internet services that you're not utilizing? Do you have Netflix that you're not watching? Have a look at those sorts of things. Have you got a lease on a car that is a super expensive car and you don't have that requirement for that super expensive car? Look at those liabilities and see what you can do to actually reduce them. Have a look at your assets and see what you might have sitting there in regards to equity that you may be able to tap into, or assets that just have not been serving you well over time that you may want to put on the market at a fair and reasonable price and not panic sell, okay? Now, I highly recommend that you go talk to your accountant. I highly recommend that you go talk to a financial planner, and I highly recommend that you go talk to a mortgage broker in trying to make those assessments. But take a good hard look at your budgets and see what you can and can't afford, and limit your costs right here, right now, and get yourself to a point where you're actually in surplus, okay? Identify the opportunities to cut those unnecessary expenses and make sure that right now you're in a surplus capacity. For many of you, you may not be able to, if you're in a negative situation, you may not be able to cut all of your liabilities, but what can you do to boost your income if you can, how and where appropriately? If you can't, then I guess you really have only one choice, and that is to drop some expenses. Know what your break-even point is. So at what point do you start to become where you start to become financially distressed, okay? Make that determination right now. Have a look at your finances and say, if it got to this point in the market, would that hurt me? If it got to this point in the market, would that hurt me? At what point do you start to get to a point where that's actually going to get to a very distressing situation for you? And if you can make that decision right now while you're unemotional, then if that occasion occurs, then you can actually do that, I guess, in a way that's not going to become emotionally distressing for you, okay? If you have some investment properties, look at any upcoming lease renewals you've got on those properties and go and talk to your tenants and see whether or not you can lock in your rentals for another 6 months or so. Get over the peak of what you think is the potential for that to be untenanted, okay? Even if you have to drop the rent for a little while just to get some certainty, make sure that you are ready and that you are prepared and that you have that certainty of income coming through. Other things that you can do to prepare. Take a longer term view on your situation. What is about to happen is going to be, it's going to bounce back, but it's not going to bounce back straight away. It's also not going to drop off the cliff tomorrow. So you want to be starting to take a longer term view on your situation and go, well, if I can afford to ride this out, hanging on is probably the right thing for me to do, okay? If you happen to be selling a property right now, maybe you're in a development that's just ended, maybe you've already got some properties that are on the market, take the money that's on the table, okay? Don't get greedy for the last extra dollar. They're already talking about the fact that right now home opens are lower, auction clearance rates are lower, and so it's going to get to a point where people are just not going to be out there buying property. Why are they not buying property? Well, because they're uncertain as to whether or not they're actually going to have a job in 3 or 6 months' time, and they're not sure whether or not, I guess, what's happening in the short term. So rather than buying something unnecessarily, people are just sitting on their hands right now. So because of that, the number of opportunities for buyers to take the property in the short term is starting to diminish. So if you have to sell, and I'm only saying if you have to sell, take the money on the table. If you don't have to sell, consider putting that back in your arsenal, putting that on the rental market, and just riding out this little while if you can. So if you don't need to sell, hold on with a longer term view. I'm suggesting that it's probably 2+ years before the market gets back to where it is right now. Now, it'll probably drop off for about 6 months and then eke its way all the way back. So it won't be a plummet and then won't be a plummet for an entire 2 years, but rather I think it'll take about 2 years to get back to where it's currently at right now. So if you don't need to sell and you can afford to hold it, that would be my guidance to you right now. If you are midway through a property deal in any way, shape or form, have a look at that deal and go, can you afford to pause it? So if you've not yet demolished the property, perhaps instead you could put it on the rental market. If you have already demolished it, can you afford to hold it? Can you afford to finish the project and then hold the finished asset? Maybe you need to put that on the rental market and keep that running, okay? So you want to have a look at these opportunities right now and determine what is the worst case scenario and what can I do? Can I afford to ride that out, okay? If you try to panic sell that along with everybody else, then that's where the market is going to plummet, okay? If you are not yet in a deal, this is where I see opportunities. If you're not yet in a deal, get deal ready and finances approved. Get cash in everything that is currently not serving you well and get your cash all in a pile ready to spend. Get approvals for any lines of credit, any redraws, etc. You've got very, very low interest rates right now. And the government has said that they're trying to incentivize the banks to actually start to lend money. So getting approvals, they're going to start to cut red tape, get those approvals ready for anything that you can do, and then sit back and wait, okay? Wait for the opportunities to present themselves. Don't jump in straight away and buy, but rather wait for the market to drop off a little and then look at, well, what was my development opportunity looking at before? And make sure you've got a single strategy in mind that you're very, very good at, and then look for the opportunities that are going to present itself in that strategy and in those 4 markets that I touched on before, okay? Now, there are going to be opportunities in other markets, that's for sure. But in those 4 markets, the population growth is inevitable, okay? It's coming, and the supply and the demand is getting tension in between it. So the market is going to come back. The question is, how long does it take to get there? So if you can sit back, I'm going to say opportunities are going to present themselves in about 6, maybe 12 months' time, where people who have become financially distressed are now starting to sell opportunities that have either development potential or long-term hold capital growth potential. And so if you can sit back and wait for those opportunities and just try and cherry pick 1 or 2 of them, you will do very, very well in this upcycle. So from a conclusion point of view, remember that the fundamentals of the property market are strong in the longer term, okay, which means that the property market cycle will bounce back. If you can afford to hold, then consider this very strongly against panic selling, okay? If you panic sell, then you're just adding to the herd, and that means that you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot, so please don't do that. There's clearly going to be some downside risk for the housing market. It is going to drop, but ultimately, how much it drops depends on how much you react. If you add to the masses, then you're going to cause it to drop even further than it should. Stay up to date with facts, not hype, okay? There's new information on policies that are being unfolding daily with regards to how and what the government is doing to try and incentivize keeping the market alive, okay? Don't react, okay? Instead, you need to choose to respond. Responding base is on fact and based on genuine assessment of the circumstances. Whereas reacting is more emotionally based and doesn't really deal with the facts that are sitting at hand, okay? Recognize that property is less volatile and slower to respond in the market, okay? So the markets are going to drop. So you're going to see shares drop, you're going to see equities drop, and they're going to drop relatively dramatically, but property will be less volatile. It will drop for sure, but it won't drop as hard and it won't drop as fast, okay? Transaction activity is going to be impacted more than the market values themselves. So you're going to see a drop in the number of people going to home opens. You're going to see a drop in the number of properties that are actually going to turn over. But the people tend to want to hold on to how much money they invested into the property in the first place. So they're not going to sell ridiculously low unless they absolutely have to. So they'll hold on to those market values as much as they can, okay? But you will see market values drop, okay? There are going to be people who unfortunately are just in situations where they have to sell. And because of that, you will see a drop in those markets. But I don't think it's going to be as dramatic as the share prices or the equities markets, okay? So be mindful of that. The government is putting stimulus measures in place to cushion the impact and make sure that businesses can stay afloat and that they're trying to do everything they can to minimize the impact of any recession. That said, I think a recession is likely, okay? So I think in the first half of 2020, there is likely to be a recession of some way, shape, or form that is going to come our way. Don't say that you weren't warned, but equally don't panic because it's coming. So the problem is that we've got a high level of household debt, which amplifies the impact of anyone that is unemployed. So there is going to be some unemployment coming, and if people have hocked themselves to the hilt beforehand and got the most expensive property they could afford, when they become unemployed, they're going to be in stress, which is why I think the market is going to drop, okay? But I don't think it's going to be as massive as everybody else in the share market. If you are cashed up, and I say if you are cashed up, then there's going to be opportunities that present in the next 6 to 12 months or so. Don't think that it won't come, because it absolutely will. Make sure that you have prepared yourself as much as humanly possible in order to do that. Now, what I want to say to you all is we have been running live monthly meetup events for the last 8 years, or just coming up to 8 years, giving you market updates and letting you know what is and isn't happening in and around the market. Clearly, at this point in time, with social distancing and things like that, providing those monthly meetups has proven to be challenging. So we have moved those monthly meetups to become online virtual meetups, okay? So for any of you who have been coming to our meetups in the past, we typically charge $25 in order to attend one of those meetups, and $250 for the entire year. And that came with the benefit of getting those market updates and seeing what's actually happening. But equally, it gave you a whole bunch of other benefits along the way. Now, because of what's happened and moving us to an online world in the short term, what we've tried to do is to say, how can we best serve our community and keep them up to date with facts as facts are actually coming to hand? How do we keep you informed as to what is going to be happening in the market, when it happens in the market, so that you can make informed decisions and respond, not react? And the best way that we thought we could do that is to, along with aligning our meetups to the virtual world, is to also provide some massive discounts for anyone wanting to become an annual member. We are eventually going to go back to these physical worlds, but instead, in the short term, we're going to have these virtual meetups. Now, we've had a virtual meetup in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne every single month for eons. We are going to maintain that cycle, and we're going to have a virtual meetup for Queensland, we're going to have a virtual meetup for New South Wales, and a virtual meetup for Victoria. But the beauty is, if you become an annual member, you'll get access to all of these meetups, which means that every single time we do a meetup, and we had one yesterday, we're going to have one again next week, you'll be able to attend every single one of them. So you can turn up to the Brisbane-based meetup and find out what's happening in the Brisbane market, as well as the New South Wales market, as well as the Victorian market, all online from the comfort of your home. Remembering you're going to be cooped up at home for quite some time, so getting live updates is one of those things that is going to be very beneficial to you. All of our presentation notes and videos going all the way back to 2012 are on there, and we get massive, massive discounts because of the size of our community with things like lighting, flooring, tiling, electrical, and a whole bunch more. So if you're ever wanting to become part of our community, and if you haven't done this before, we're offering, I guess, a discount for $99 for the first year rather than the normal $250 for our annual membership. This means that you can attend all of these meetups virtually and get live information as it's coming to hand. As the markets are changing, we'll give you the updates as to how and what is happening. And that is the best thing that we think that we can do to provide opportunities to keep you informed as we go. That said, this is the first time that I've tried to do this via Zoom, so I don't know whether or not I can actually get to the point of seeing what the questions are that have come from you guys as we go. So let's see if I can see what our questions are from the group. Let me just stop this share for a moment and see, can I see what questions have come through? No, I cannot. So this is not very helpful to me. Okay, hang on 2 secs while I bring this over here. Okay, I can see a ton of comments here. So a number of people saying, hi folks, so hello everybody back. Linda says, I would have thought Corona would go up in value. It's great publicity. No, it did not go up in value, went down in value. But I'm doing what I can to keep it afloat. Okay. Cara says, great advice. Linda says, should we expect to get discounts on properties right away? No, the answer to that, Linda, is not straight away. I think there's going to be a good 3 to 6 months before we see the impacts on the property market. As I said, there is going to be a lag between what is happening in the share market and the equities market as to what you're going to see in the property market. And it's not going to be as massive, but it will happen. Depending upon what happens in the next, I'm going to say month with market movements, with the spread of the contagion within Australia, will depend on how much people actually start to panic, which will then depend on how quickly we actually drop off. I'm predicting we'll probably get about a 10% drop in our property market in the next 6 months or so, but that will take about 2 years to actually recover. Now, that is a prediction from someone who is not an economist, and as someone who's not an economist, it is really just an opinion. So please don't say that is fact and that I'm giving you advice. Rather, I want you to go looking for the evidence that you need to actually support that. Equally, so hopefully that answers that. A couple more people saying hi. Shelley saying first virtual meetup yesterday was great. Yes, it was. Thank you, Shelley, for all of your assistance in getting that online to make that happen. Declan says signing up for the virtual annual membership tonight. Thank you, Bargain. You're welcome, mate. Very, very welcome. Peter says, do you reckon there's going to be a lot of distressed properties considering banks are putting interest rates on hold? So the answer is that yes, there will be some distressed properties. That is absolutely for sure. What is happening, though, is the government are providing incentives to try and stop the banks from foreclosing, okay? Which means that hopefully most of us will be able to ride that through. That said, unfortunately, there will absolutely be people who can't afford to keep their properties alive, and they will be selling it just to try and get their cash back. But hopefully it's not as bad as we can, because the government's doing what it can to hold them up. Now, whether you are a Liberal, a Labor or a Greens, right now, what I can commend all of the politicians is that they are being very bipartisan. They're trying to make sure that the best interests of us as a, excuse me, did something really nasty there, scratched my nose. They're trying to do the best things that they can for all of Australia, and they're leaving politics out of it, which is fantastic to see all parties. Sunny says, what's stimulus available for landlords? At the moment, there's nothing right now, Sunny. The challenge that we're going to have, and reality, what the government's trying to do is keep people employed. If they can keep people employed, they're going to be able to keep on paying rent. So rather than them subsidise the property owners, instead they're going to try and subsidise the people trying to stay in jobs, which will then look after the property owners. So I don't think you'll ever see the government trying to subsidise your rent, mate. So as much as that would be nice, I don't think it's ever going to happen. Peter says, do you reckon banks will loosen lending criteria to get lending up after coronavirus? Absolutely, Peter. As a matter of fact, there are some incentives announced today from the government that is pretty much mandating that the banks need to do that. There's small business loans that are beginning to become available. There's cutting of red tape that's going to make that much, much easier. Whether that flows through to the investment area, right now, it's very much about businesses and making sure that businesses, I guess, get access to the funds. Because if the business can stay afloat, they can keep people employed. If they can keep people employed, there's money to go back into the economy. It's all about keeping the economy alive right now. So I can't see any other questions, folks. So hopefully you got plenty out of that. Dan's got a question here. He's just come in late. How would the 3 ways you'll implement to leverage these unfortunate events? How can we start looking for opportunities and find the most distressed properties? So Dan, what I would say to that is I am not one for looking for distressed properties. I want to be very clear. There are people on the other side of the transactions here. I'm not one to take advantage of those people. What instead I'm there to do is to say, inevitably, there's going to be people who are in trouble. How do we help them? If we can help them, then that in turn helps us. So we don't want to be, I guess, taking advantage of people, but rather trying to work with them to solve their particular problem. And if we can solve their problem, that will help us. So the 3 ways are get your finances ready, get pre-approvals in place, get anything that you've got, any access to cash you've got, put it all in a pile and get ready. I'm going to say in 3 to 6 months is when those opportunities are going to start to present themselves. So right now, if you're wanting to learn how to become a property developer, right now is the time. By the time you actually get some of your skills up, that's when I think the market opportunities are going to present themselves best. So hopefully that helps. Jim says, how do you see BCC and QUU being able to maintain timelines? I'm not going to get into specific jurisdictions, Jim. I think they've got their own issues and challenges, especially around staffing levels that are going to happen in there. So I'm not going to talk to those specific jurisdictions other than to say all employers in every area of the business is going to sorry, not just in the property market, but in all areas, they're going to struggle with staffing shortages and the like. So I think all jurisdictions are going to be challenged in that regard. Sonny says, thank you. Look after yourself and keep up the great work. Thank you, mate. Thank you, Sonny. Appreciate that. Ray says, thanks. Dan says, thanks. Well, folks, that's it from me. Hopefully you guys got plenty out of that. And I'm going to bid you farewell. I'm going to go and finish the rest of my Corona beer. I am not one to be judging by the name. And I look forward to seeing you on the flip side. If you are an annual member, then you get access to our virtual live events. I will put a link into this. Actually, what I forgot to say before, and I'll put it back up there again. Give me 2 seconds. What I forgot to say is if you have any interest at all in that annual membership that we spoke about before, then please make sure that, whoops, hang on. Please make sure that you SMS the word annual to this phone number, okay? If you SMS the word annual to that phone number, we will send you an automated email that will give you a little bit of insights as to our annual membership, what you can and can't get from that, some of the benefits that sit in and around that. I'll also put a link into this post so that you can go directly to our annual membership page and you'll see in order to get that discount, there will be a discount coupon code that sits there. So please put that discount coupon code in. The word is COVID-19. COVID-19 will get you access to that discount annual membership. So thank you, folks. It's been a pleasure. Hopefully you guys got plenty out of that. I'll continue my Sunday sessions every single Sunday at 5 p.m. Brisbane time, which is 6 p.m. the rest of the the Eastern Seaboard and slightly different for the Western side of the world. But yeah, hopefully you guys got plenty out of that, and looking forward to seeing all of our annual members for our virtual meetup next Saturday, that would be Sydney based, but anyone who's an annual member from anywhere in Australia can actually watch. So thank you, folks. Bye for now, and I look forward to seeing you on the flip side. See you guys.